Start.
Okay, well, thank you, Toastmaster. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever made a list of the decisions that you took during your life about and make you maybe become the professional that you are today? Well, I did, and I'm going to share it with you now. My name is Iban. I'm from Barcelona, from Spain, originally from there, now from Charlotte. And I come from a middle-class family. My mother was a housewife, before was a painter, once a painter, and my father was a lawyer and an accountant, and he worked for an American company called Grace, a chemical company. I have also have two siblings, one brother and one sister, 6 and 8 years both older than me, and they both studied the same as my father. I think that it was like a copy and paste decision to make it easier. Today, my sister works part-time, has 2 kids, and works part-time as a civil lawyer. And my brother is a literature lover and has 3 or 4 degrees more, and is a manager in a public library. So I was lucky. I saw all the path of my siblings in the school, in the law school, and I saw that they were not all the way happy. So I wanted to do really what I wanted. I got to choose, and I got free of mind about what I really wanted to do. I just decided, when I was a child, I always had a piece of paper and a pencil next to my textbook, just to draw. And even I have to say that sometimes I had even my desk and my textbook replace my piece of paper, which I had been so many times in trouble. But I guess that I had clear what I wanted to do in my life, and that was shapes and colors. Yes, shapes and colors is something so simple, but it gives all the mixture. It gives unlimited combinations of options. The time came, and I got to choose the school that I was going to learn, and I had at that point a big question about 3-dimension or 2-dimension, and I chose 3-dimension because the school recently launched a new degree in Spain and was going to be also in Europe, and I had the opportunity to be one of the first ones in Europe to have that title. So I started with that, and at the same time I was learning HTML, Dreamweaver, Flash, Illustrator, Freehand, Corel, and I thought to jump with 2 feet into the water and to make to start a school with a friend and a teacher of mine, and we started a school at the same time. In 5 months after, we got so much success. I was teaching all day. We had 6 teachers more, and it was impossible for me to go to that school because even it was 1 hour and a half away from my house. So I switched, and I got to go to a graphic design school 5 minutes away from my job, and one of the best in Europe at the time. And so I just switched, and I started studying there at the same time that I was teaching. And after a few years, I got and having my students asking for me to do jobs in graphic design that they needed, I fast grow my business, my client base, and even from referrals and all of that. And after a few years to finish the school, I decided to jump and just stop teaching and become just a graphic designer full time. And I agreed with my partner to take part of the school and convert that in a business center. I will have my studio, my graphic design studio there, and I will keep these client base and new clients. And I had the opportunity to help and focus about startups, and I did all I could, and even one of the examples is that I got a client and he had a very good product, but he had not recognized, the brand was not a recognizable one. So I helped him to fulfill his needs, and in a year he got from the sales from $200,000 to $1.5 million. So which I was really proud about that. And that is part of my story, and all these points and all these experiences have built me today as a professional. And today with this speech tomorrow is going to help me tomorrow to become also a better one, a better person. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. And
Good afternoon, fellow Toastmasters and also honored guests. Now, I feel sorry for the guys in the back, but I'll try to give you guys a little snap right here of how I started goofy footing down a mountain.
There you go, Matt.
Oh, we can do that? Oh, Now, as you guys seen, that was my first fall forward on the snowboard, and also the first of many fall backwards on the snowboard. So I want to go ahead and describe to you how I started goofy footing down a mountain. But I want to give you guys a little brief history about myself and being adventurous. When I was growing up in Hickory, we was surrounded by some lakes like Lake Hickory and the Catawba River. So when I was growing up around 16, 17 years old, I started going water skiing, kneeboarding, water tubing. I love the water. I love being outside. I love the ocean. So in a way, I'm a summer bug just because the outdoors are fun. However, on the opposite of that, I'm not a cold weather person. I hate cold weather. I really dislike snow. I dislike the sleet. I just don't like being cold. So for the first 30-odd years of my life, I was able to dodge these snowboarding and skiing adventures all my friends would go on. Because something about being face first in the snow is not appealing to me. However, when you start dating somebody, you start doing the things that they do just to have a great, successful relationship. My girlfriend is an avid snowboarder. She's been snowboarding for years. She's been snowboarding in Colorado, she's been snowboarding in Snowshoe, West Virginia, and also in Beach Mountain. She knows the stars like Lindsey Vonn and Shaun White. She actually sits and watches the X Games, which is cool, until she wants you to go do it with her. I definitely underestimated all the equipment you had to get for snowboarding. First of all, you have to rent a snowboard. Had to also rent the boots, which to me they weighed 20 pounds because you had to click them in and pop it just for your foot to be secure. So the guy asked me, are you goofy foot or regular? I don't know. Well, he's like, are you right-handed? Yes. Do you put all your pressure on your right foot like you're launching to hit something? I said yes. He's like, okay, so if you're 80%, chances are you're regular. You're not goofy foot. Okay. So I did not know this would be so important when I get up to the mountain. So we finally get there. I get my lift ticket. It's cold. It's Sugar Mountain. I did not know walking to the lift was actually going to be a challenge because I had to put in my snowboard. So as I walked the snowboard, was automatically going like that. Getting on the lift is almost a challenge because you have to time it perfectly to be able to sit down, reach for the bar, put your foot on that bar so you won't be dangling as you're going up the lift and have all that weight. Also, getting off the lift. You can't just get off and walk. That doesn't make too much sense. So I was able to glide on my snowboard and get out of the people's way because there's a 30-second window between the time that you get off your lift and the people behind you are coming towards you. I only fell once at this trap, which actually surprised me. And my girlfriend only stood up once. The correlation is the time that I fell and the time that she stood up, she conveniently used me as balance so she could stand as I go face first into the snow. So I'm ready for my first snowboarding adventure. I climb up, I stand up. There you go. So I just edge down the mountain. Fell down a couple of times, but I'm getting the hang of it. The third time it rained a little bit, and I totally underestimated how fast one can go on an icy slope down the mountain. Felt like I was going 200 miles an hour, probably 20. But I got scared, which is rare for me, and I fell down on purpose. Now, I did learn the hard way. Don't fall face forward. But I didn't like how my neck felt when my feet was in the air and I tumbled like a rag doll. Didn't like that. On the first day, the last run, I'm getting on a snowboard like this. My girlfriend said, "You're doing it wrong. You're doing it goofy foot. You're not doing it the way you're supposed to." I'm like, brilliant. I'll do it regularly, and I'm going to be the next Shaun White. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for me. I did not feel comfortable. I fell down more times. So the second day we went, I let her go ahead of me because I don't know if I let her. She's a pro at this. So I kept on going this way because I felt more comfortable. And then she catches me again. She's like, "Matthew, you're doing it wrong." I'm like, "Okay, I'll do it your way." Same result as the first day. I fell down more. Worse falls, bruised elbows, hyperextended knees somewhere in the whole process. So we got done. It's night and it's still snowing. I'm like, let's do it one more time because I'm adventurous. I gotta do it one more time in the night, snowboarding while it's snowing. I mean, this don't happen every day, especially in North Carolina. So we went. So I got on. She's like, "You're doing it the wrong way." I'm like, "Baby, I got this. I'm gonna be goofy footing down this mountain." Mr. Toastmaster.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carve your name on hearts, not tombstones. A legacy is etched into the minds of others and the stories they share about you. The author Shannon Alder put that quotation together, and on today, which is really the celebration of Martin Luther King's birthday. Martin Luther King was born on January 15, 1929, so he would have turned 86 years of age this year. And one thing that we're familiar with about Dr. King is his rich legacy. His leadership during the civil rights movement in this country during the 50s and the 60s, the tragedy that was his assassination. But to be a little bit more nuanced and to celebrate him as he was, as we remember him, as vivid and lively and a great orator. As many of you know, I participate in a club in the South Park area known as Toastmasters, where we look at speeches and we practice them. And in looking at this speech, the "I Have a Dream" speech, to which Dr. King is most famous, you really appreciate how talented he was as an orator in the way that he structured that speech. So today what I'd like to do is just move through a couple of aspects of that speech and break it down a little bit so we can all build an appreciation of really the genius of the oratory skills of Dr. King. The first thing I'll point out about this speech is Dr. King's grasp of the moment, of his environment. And any speaker must truly understand, who is my audience? Why am I here? What is my goal today in delivering this speech? And for Dr. King, with that humongous crowd there, and delivering this speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial behind him, literally at the foot of Lincoln in 1963. Now, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which we're all familiar with, took place in 1863. So this was the 100th anniversary of it. And so in starting off his speech, Dr. King starts off by saying, 5 score ago. Now, we're familiar that later in 1863, Lincoln had the Gettysburg Address, where he starts off 407 years ago. So what a great technique by Dr. King to pay homage to the moment, homage to Lincoln, and tie those two speeches together, tie a great speech from 1863 together with what would become an awesome speech from 1963. So clearly we can see that Dr. King had an appreciation for his environment, the sense of history. He knew what he was there to do. A second aspect of the speech, which you'll see throughout that speech, is Dr. King's use of repetition, of repeating a phrase so that when the speech was over and you walked away from that moment in time, there were certain phrases which really wouldn't leave your memory. Let me offer you an example of one. As he transitions away from his opening, 5 score, 100 years ago, and speaks to Dr. Abraham Lincoln's legacy, he goes on further to say, well, 5 score, 100 years, but 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life is still sadly crippled. 100 years later, the Negro... 100 years later, he pounds that point home. He goes on from there. He actually says that 4 times, 100 years later. A few moments later, he pounds home the point to stay hopeful in this plight. He tells the audience, go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina. He uses the phrase, go back 6 times in a row. So a great example of repetition. And certainly we all remember the climax of this speech when he says, I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. Again, repetition, a second great technique used by Dr. King in his delivery of his speech. One last area that I would like to point out, a third area, a third technique with Dr. King, is clearly his use of tone, of pace, of volume, throughout the speech, a true orator as he brings you in, as he softens his voice so that he draws you in. And then he fills you with energy as he projects out across the mall. Very powerful. If you think about the end of that speech, he talks about letting freedom ring. And he borrows from My Country 'Tis of Thee, Sweet Land of Liberty. From thee I sing, and he points out, where freedom rings, another great line in that song. But then he hammers it home when he says, let it ring from the mountains of the Alleghenies, let it ring. And then he transitions into Alabama and Mississippi and these bastions of prejudice that existed at the time. But his voice, as he says, let it ring, and his voice itself rings. A third technique used by Dr. King, just his tone, his voice, his pace. So as we remember Dr. King today, on Martin Luther King Day, and we celebrate his birthday, a Toastmaster might also take great appreciation in just his pure skill. I've gone ahead and I've posted a link out on our Facebook page. So if you wanted to visit the South Park Toastmasters Facebook page, you can take a look at the speech text while listening along. It truly is an education in speech giving and speech structuring, and it's truly an honor to hold Dr. King as one of the greatest leaders of this country. Mr. Toastmaster.
Most of us are experienced, a few new folks, so again, the summary on the evaluations is simply it's a time for the individual speaker to gain constructive feedback, constructive criticism, point out areas where he can improve, but it's also illustrative for all of us. Doesn't require a lot of cogitation for the rest of us because we've been here before, but it's a good idea to listen and pay attention to the evaluators as well. So for our first evaluating Iban would be Mr. Tim McCluskey. Tim's been with us about, 2.5 years, maybe so. He's in the medical device technology field. Please welcome Tim McCluskey.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for stepping up as general evaluator. Fellow Toastmasters, or Toastmaster of the Day, fellow Toastmasters, and specifically Iban. Iban today delivered his icebreaker speech. He is probably the newest member of the South Park chapter, because I believe he stepped through that door for the first time just last week. So you talk about diving into it head first. The one thing about the icebreaker speech, and he was sitting there beforehand, and I said, well, good luck today, this is your icebreaker speech. He said, yes, I'm very nervous, And I said, there's no need to be nervous. We're not here to necessarily critique one another for the sense of making it more pressure-filled for you, but this is an opportunity for us to all improve as public speakers. And I think the one thing that Iban did today in the icebreaker speech that does make it easier is that he told a story. A story is something that is familiar with you, right? It is an event or a sequence of events that happened in your life. And he started off by basically introducing himself, and he talked about his background. He came from Barcelona, came from a middle-class family. He talked about his mother was a stay-at-home mother, a housewife, and talked about his siblings being older than he, 6 and 8 years, I believe, are the two. So he gave us a little bit of background about himself and his family, and it led into, and it dovetailed very nicely into his story about how these crucial decisions that he references, that each decision led to another opportunity to make another decision, not just for his personal life, but also in his career in graphic design. The training that he had to go through and his choices that he made to be the best at what he does. And I think that when you prepare these speeches, one of the things that we're looking for in the icebreaker speech is that, was he organized? Was he prepared? Did he rehearse this? And I think it's very obvious that he did. And in terms of being organized, the cogitation, if I'm saying that right, when you consider by true definition, concerted thought or reflection, he had to give some thought and reflection back to his past, back to his family, back to his career path, and all the hurdles that he faces, and the decisions that he made that he called as being crucial decisions in that process. So when you think about an icebreaker, he made the right decision by picking a story, but he did a really good job of setting it up. He had a good opening, he had a good body, and he wrapped it up very nicely at the end. The one thing that I think you need to be careful in is, it's good to leave the podium, but sometimes you want to make sure that you're not pacing back and forth. You want to maybe just deliver that message a little bit more. But other than that, I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
Quick question, Ronnie.
Brendan's speech was from an advanced book. Now, it's difficult in this book to completely know what's going on for Brendan unless you know what its objective was. Picture Brendan giving a speech not to us, but to maybe his work. Maybe he's out in public and talking to some civic. What he was trying to do was talk about Toastmasters to people outside of Toastmasters and do some public relations. And I think he did a great job. The best thing that he did was he was so timely. Today's Martin Luther King Day, and he gave great information for anybody that maybe needed to brush up on some of their classes, some of their memories of history classes on Martin Luther King. I'd forgotten it was tying it back into Lincoln with the 5 square, so I found that fascinating. He did a lot of little things and delivered it in a manner that was very observant of today and what today is all about. Drew you in. Started out with a great quote, draws you in with information that maybe it's like calculus I just forgot about, but things about the speech that I found interesting. One of the first questions, how did the audience react to the speaker? I think everybody enjoyed the speech. I think regardless of whether we would have been internal or external, we appreciated what he had to say. How was Toastmasters mentioned throughout the speech? This is a public relations speech. How is he providing information and marketing Toastmasters to a group that maybe is outside of Toastmasters. I think he did a great job. Remember, he brought it up in the middle of the speech, and some of you may have been wondering, you know, how are you bringing up Toastmasters? Why are you bringing up Toastmasters? But he did it in a way like, look at this great speaker. Look at the 3 positive things he did. Look at all he does well here, and what can we learn from it? And oh, by the way, subtly saying Toastmasters is the study of great speeches like this. For the information presented to the audience, again, he had 3 good points. He was talking about the grasp of the moment. He was talking about the use of repetition. You know, how he would say, hopeful. 100 years later, I have a dream. And he spent extra time on tone, pace, and volume. Something that we can all work on. Something that would make all of our speeches better. One of the questions is, assuming you knew nothing about this organization beforehand, would you have a favorable impression of this organization? Yes. He ties it in at the end, mentions Toastmasters again, and subtly throughout the speech, it's making us feel positive. And did you notice he mentioned our Facebook page? That's a way to go and get more information about this club that he's representing. And all, great job. I cannot think of any ways you could have improved and not had more information in such a short speech. Mr. Evaluator.
Role models in my life. A few people that I have worked for who have inspired me to become the person that I am and to continue to grow and prosper my careers. For those of you that don't know me or haven't seen me in a while, I cut hair and I also do education for American Crew, men's grooming products. So I have worked with and currently work with a lot of people who have been great inspirations for me. Things that I have never thought I'd be able to achieve before. When I first got into this career of cutting hair, I sucked. To be honest with you, it was just not clicking with me. But through a lot of encouragement, people kept me motivated, kept me inspired, kept me moving on. 20 years in the business now, I look back. 10 years ago, I thought I knew enough. 10 years later, I realized I did not know anything. And I really hope this continues to go on through my life and my career. Thank you.
About Toastmasters is that forces you to think, split-second decisions, having to come up with different things. I had a boss named Anthony Chicory, who was the owner of Hudson Valley Office Furniture, and wasn't a very nice guy. He would berate all the employees. He was involved in gambling and all kinds of different things that he wasn't supposed to be doing. But he had built up a really nice business and always carried around a lot of cash money on him. And he was like an old school Italian guy that would just walk down the street, and he was very nice to everybody that he saw. But when he got back to us, he wasn't very nice to us. He was very difficult to work with when it came down to training. There really wasn't any. We had to learn what we were doing. But as time went on, I started seeing different things about him that I hadn't seen before. I started seeing how he was with children. I started seeing how he was with paying his bills. I started seeing how he had built a brand. And I